Good afternoon to you viewers, the Colonel speaking to you live from the Preceptory for British Imperial YouTube Broadcasting, and here we are again. We are graced with the presence of the Squire, and he's very kindly agreed to discuss a few of his wonderful anecdotes and do a bit more rambling on. Good afternoon, Squire.
Good afternoon, Colonel. Hello everyone.
It's good to have you back here at the Preceptory. The heating's on in the one part of the house where it works properly. And I wonder if you care to tell us a few wonderfully interesting stories about the characters you've met. But I bet you've met one or two characters in your time.
Oh my word, yes. Well, I suppose one of the first characters would have been my father, and he was born in Oxford and eventually moved out to Hayley to be with the farm. And he was one of these men who, well, it was quite right in a way, because the jobs had to be done with farming, and particularly in those days there wasn't the mechanisation, and you just had to get on with it. It was long, hard slog, long hours.
I imagine he started with horses on the farm.
Oh yes, he was always a horseman. I think he tolerated tractors, but I think he really was a horseman and loved the horses. And I think during the Second World War they had something like 8 cart horses and eventually got hold of a tractor in about 1943 because they needed more ploughing done. They needed to get things done quicker. But they had to. It was one of those things you probably just couldn't buy a tractor. You had to go and get permits and goodness knows what to get something like that.
Wasn't there an interesting incident when he was on a tractor in the middle of a field?
Oh yes, that's right. Well, that wasn't actually much later. I think it was probably in the 50s, late 50s. He was working on one tractor in one field, and he got his tractor driver was working in another field, and the tractor stopped, and it was stopped for a very long time, and the driver went over to see what had happened. And father, the engine had cut out, and it was, of course, these old tractors, you didn't have self-starters, you had to crank them up. Well, there was a self-starter, it was you know, because the starter handle on the front, you had to swing it up, you were the self-starter, yourself started the tractor.
Yes.
Anyway, the engine had kicked back, and he tripped, and the handle had come round and hit him on the head and laid him out cold.
Good Lord. And
he must have been laying there for quite a time anyway. He came round, and I remember when mother went to fetch me from school, she said, "No, don't. Dad has been hurt. The tractor kicked back, and he got a big plaster over his head. He'd been hit just above the eye."
Dear,
I remember that one. And another incident we had was we had 2 of these wonderful old barns, Cotswold stone, with Stonesfield slate roofs, and we had these. They were designed in such a way that you could drive a vehicle like a horse and wagon or a tractor and wagon through one set of doors into the barn, unload it, and then drive out the other side. So there were 2 pairs of doors. There were 2 pairs of doors, and you went through it. Oh, that was the original intention. Anyway, in the middle of these doors, to stop them blowing inwards, there was a long pole about probably 20 feet high. Long pole about 4 inches square that had to be put into place, and then the doors closed. Well, somebody hadn't put the pole in properly. Father opened the thing, it fell out, and he was hit on the head with
Dear.
I think it caught him over the eye with a nail or something like that.
People forget how dangerous agriculture is.
Well, it was in those days. I mean, this is, of course, that's years before health and safety. Farm safety was improved about 1958 with a lot of new regulations and safety. It was before the HSE as we know it then, but it was a step. It was a step in perhaps in the right direction.
I was thinking of the story of him being dive bombed during the war.
Oh yes, that's right. Well, what happened? Of course, he was out in the fields one day, and he said you had to be very careful because enemy craft did come over towards Whitney. Whitney was actually hit by 2 bombs. I forget, 1943, I think, something like that. I can't just remember. But I think it wasn't actually being attacked. I think they were either trying to hit Briars Norton or they were just jettisoning bombs on the way home. Anyway, I know that he said that he was in the field one day on the tractor at haymaking time. I don't know quite when not quite in the war, but anyway, he was, and then all of a sudden there was it started to dive and submachine gun fire.
Dear, oh dear.
He jumped on, sort of hid under the tracks, tried to get under the tracks right of the way.
Oh, what dear, it's frightening sort of
too
thing.
true, yes indeed.
But he was well known for some of his rather interesting sayings, which related to sort of the lifestyle and the fact that you had to be a strong character in those days to run a farm.
Oh yes, I know. Well, he used to be a man who got very easily frustrated if things didn't get done. You know, if anything broke down, there was a terrible fuss and bother. You know, the end of the world had come. And I remember this particular time there was a problem. A friend of mine was there at the time. He'll remember this when he hears this. He said, "Father, he threw something on the floor or something. He said, here I am, surrounded by damn fools, idiots, and my mother." Forget that. That was a good one.
Oh, wonderful. And he got quite cross one day when there was a visitor who asked for him in rather odd terms.
Oh, yes, I think that's... Oh, about the... yes, that's right. He was the colonel that lived at the local manor and came in and said to my mother, "He's himself about." He's himself about. Oh dear, oh dear. Father was not pleased about that. But farming in those days contained wonderful, wonderful characters. There was an elderly couple that lived on a farm, I suppose about a mile and a half away from where we were. And it was the husband's family. His father had been there before him. And it was a farm really that was, in the early even the middle 1960s, it really should have been preserved as it was, because there was no pretension about it. It wasn't put together like it. It was exactly as it was. You had the situation that the lavatory was at the top end of the garden. You hadn't got any running water or electricity in the house. They used to manage on with a standpipe outside, and they used to cook on they had a Rayburn, something like a Rayburn or something like that. They used to do the cooking, like sort of cook and heat thing that partly heated the house. They didn't have a gramophone, but they had a radio that was battery operated. But in their one room they had a piano, and the other room they had an American harmonium type organ. And the wife used to play, and the husband used to sing. And I remember we went down, we used to call in and see him sometimes, and Father used to stop, so we'd go and see them and see how they are. And we used to call in and have an outing. And it used to happen, like a cup of tea. Oh, yes, please. And so we had a cup of tea. "I know what we'll do, we'll have a song," he said. And this is mid-morning, you know, and you'd sit down there, and the lady would play the piano, and he'd sing us some songs. And I remember him singing things like The Lost Chord, Holy City, and what was the other one he used to sing? We'll Gather Lilacs, that was a popular one, and Old Father Thames. And those were ones he used to sing, and this was we'd come off the farm, called down to see them, and they were singing these songs. And on a Sunday, they used to go in and have a sort of hymn session around the harmonium on a Sunday. I went to see them there. I remember they did that for me once. I mean, that is unique. You just wouldn't see that.
And that was the 1960s, not the 1890s.
No, 1960s. They didn't have any electricity. They had candles and oil lamps, big paraffin lamps. And they didn't have a car, but they had a couple of those big old sit-up and beg bicycles, and used to ride in great style along the road on them. But they did have a tractor. A tractor was a David Brown Cropmaster, which they bought in the early 50s. I eventually bought it off of them, and I used it for a year or two. Anyway, the story of that is that they used to use the tractor to partly do their shopping. They both used to ride on the tractor from their farm down the road to where the bus used to run from. Park the tractor on the other side of the road, get on the bus and go and do their shopping in Whitney, and then get on the tractor and drive home at the end of it. And that was that. They were a remarkable couple. But that farm, it was wonderful. It really was stepping. These farming museums have been created, and quite often by people that haven't had much experience. But this one was a farm preserved just as it was. There were sheds with wonderful old Oxfordshire horse wagons and things like this, which were his father's. with their name on. And he showed me a tree that he planted, a big chestnut tree that he planted when he was sort of 10 years old, which was probably about sort of 1900, because he'd been through the First World War, and that was a remarkable couple they were, and there were all sorts of people like that, and almost everywhere you looked there were characters creeping out of the woodwork in farming in those days. I remember a week or so ago we mentioned Darling Buds of May.
Yes.
That is very, although it's a fictional series, it's very close to what things were in the late 50s.
Well, people have asked about Auntie Betty. Do you have any more stories about her?
Well, as I explained, she was a real character. She was my mother's school friend, lifelong friend. I mean, she died a few years before Mother, so Mother was there when she was around when she died. And she'd come from quite a, I think the family had been quite wealthy in the past. I think they'd come from, I can't remember where the place was now, but it was quite, I think there was a big house involved years ago, and she was a real character. She was like something out of the 1920s, one of these ladies with grey hair pulled straight back in a bun, and I think for various reasons, when the war came, she was around Oxford as a fire watcher or something like that.
Right.
And she always at the time she had a beret and a tin helmet, you see, Mother steel helmets. And Mother used to be furious because in the 1950s, after the war, Betty used to be riding around Oxford with on a bicycle with this fire watcher's beret on, with a stupid flower just stuck in it, pointed straight up. You see, and it used to annoy Mother like fury, and she rode about with this thing for years. But the strange thing was that when Betty died, I was a godson, you see, and I was asked by the solicitor to go and have a look around the house and see if there was anything any memories I wanted. And I went through some boxes, and this was about 2000. This was in the year 2000, and there in a box, packed away, was the berry and the tin helmet, which I've got at home. I kept that. I did keep that.
Yes, I've seen them hanging on the house peg.
And also she got photographs of me as a child, my parents' wedding, my mother's 21st birthday party in a bedroom. And the bedroom was an old house up off Cowley Road, and I'd never seen anything like it. It had got like a bedroom heater, which had a gas heater underneath it, but on the top it had a couple of gas rings, so you could make a cup of tea. I suppose it was about the size of an HMB 130 gramophone in cast iron, and it was gas. You could that was in the bedroom.
Extraordinary.
And they got one of those original old roll top baths, with the claw feet. That was original in there. So she was a great character, with Betty. Very kind lady, used to be, and she married a gentleman who was an artist, and he did a lot of painting around Oxford. Wonderful architectural, very close, detailed paintings, and he was a water diviner. He was one of these people who could walk with a forks,
those
a whalebone,
yes,
and detect water.
Good Lord.
He gave us a demonstration of it once, and he said to me, "Look, Nigel, what are you doing? I'll walk like this. You walk backwards and hold my wrists like that." And he got it. I mean, he was an elderly man. He lifted me up the ground.
Good
The
Lord.
strength he got was incredible out of it.
Dear, oh dear.
And the thing spun round and round. And there is a book written about the Thames. I think it's by Mary Pritchard and Humphrey Carpenter, about the source of the Thames at, is it Kelmscott? Is it somewhere near Kelmscott?
I think it is. Lechlade is generally
somewhere near Kelmscott, and they knew him and they took him there, and they had him walk over the ground to see if they could find where the actual source of the Thames was. The stream, yes. The stream emerges.
Because there is a statue up there, Codestone statue from the Crystal Palace of Old Father Thames or some such thing.
Yes.
At Lechlade.
That's right. Well, I think they took him there to check that.
Right.
But he'd been in the forces in the First World War, and there was a radio station near Hayley called Leafield, which had been a First World War transmitter, and he said he'd done guard duty there.
Good Lord.
and he did our duty at there. Yes. Yeah.
Oh, amazing.
Oh, yes, that's Aunt Betty. Yes, she was in the City Library for years in Oxford when it was down St Aldhates, on the left-hand side, Blue Boar Street.
Ah, yes, yes.
Used to be down there. That's right. And then she was one of the chief people there. Got loads and loads of books in that house. My word, she did.
It's sad when people pass on, because that's it. There are no their like is not seen again.
No, exactly. That's very true.
And didn't your father used to take you to farming auctions?
Oh yes, farm sales. That used to be an experience. Usually, there were 1 or 2 times a year when periods of rental finished, and then a lot of farms there would be quite a few farm sales. You don't see so many farm sales today, but in those days they used to be quite frequent. The local Oxford Times used to have several sales a week advertised. Because the thing is, in those days, farming was much smaller in those days. It was a lot of smaller farms, and a lot of these people had got a lot of very old machinery and stuff, and we used to go and have a look at these sales. It used to be quite an experience. And we always had given these lectures about bidding at sales. It was really amazing, really, because he was very keen on things like this. He always said, if you're interested in that thing, don't study it too far. Look at the one next to it, look at it, and glance at the other one you're looking at, so giving the impression you're looking at the wrong thing.
Yes.
Because if they think you're interested, they'll jump in on it and you won't get it.
Yes.
And the other thing he always said, is to work out what you're going to pay for it, never go a bit over the top. And that stands in very good stead. And when you think of eBay, the way some of these things go flying out of the window, where people get too carried away.
Yeah, well, yes, indeed, and auctions in general, really.
Oh golly, yes.
I try to explain to people there is no ceiling at an auction. The auctioneer will take bids until someone stops. It's not, so an item which may be estimated at 80 to 120 is not going to stop at 120. It might make £30, or it might make 5 million if 2 people want it.
That sort of thing has happened.
Well, yes.
That sort of thing has happened in the antiques business, and farming used to be really fun, because you often used to get machinery, livestock, and they used to have the first part of the sale as the livestock, and then they used to call the animals the livestock and the rest of it the dead stock. And usually the sale was sold up, they had the sale and then the farm was sold, or at least that's what happened when we sold up in 1971. So yes, it was, and of course the characters that used to get about, oh dear, too many to remember now. It's incredible.
Well, this is it. Farming was a strange profession, really, in those days, and way before. It was dangerous, it was lonely, and some of these people, spent a lot of time on their own and got a bit odd.
Oh yes, indeed. Well, of course, you see, the trouble is, in those days it was all manual handling. Today everything is done by machinery. When I was 16 or 17 years old, I was pitching bales onto a wagon with a pitchfork all day long.
And muck spreading by hand.
Oh, muck spreading by hand. Oh, absolutely. Yes, it didn't. Some people had muck spreaders, but usually that reminds me of a story about muck spreading. When I was about 17, I had a provisional license to drive the tractor, you see, and I was my first job. We had to go and do some muck spreading, you see. So anyway, I'd loaded the cart up with this stuff, and going down the road, something happened, and the tailgate went on the truck.
Oh.
And I was getting all this blasting of horns of people, and I was sort of turning around, wondering what the hell was going on, and all this stuff was sprinkling out onto the road.
Oh dear.
I was coming up to a very sharp bend, so I couldn't do anything about it, and I had to keep going and get round out the corner, and then get with a fork and fork it all into the side of the road.
Oh dear.
Now the other thing happened with tractor driving. We had a Fordson Major tractor at the time, a bit later than the old standard we had, and the exhaust pipe used to drop into the top of the manifold. You see, you had the manifold, and then the exhaust pipe used to drop in.
Yeah.
And of course there were a lot of people with horses in those days, so you had to be a bit careful with this. You don't want to spook the horses. Anyway, I was driving down the road and the local riding school came all very prim and proper from the other end, you see. So I slowed the tractor down and slammed the throttle shut, and the damn thing backfired and blew the exhaust pipe off. Clatter, clatter, clatter. All these horses and people all over there, all shouting and carrying on. I could do nothing whatever about it. I just had to hope the ground would swallow me up, you know, with all this din going on. Oh, you can imagine it, horses and people all over there.
Yeah, unfortunately, horsey girls can get a bit cross, and they use the sort of language I would describe as unladylike.
Oh, good Lord, yes.
In one incident, I was involved with a bicycle and an horse. You know, I said to the girl, you know, the horse, there are 2 bits of equipment needed here: blinkers for the horse and a bit for you. Because the language she came out with was absolutely appalling, and she was, you know, daughter of one of the grandest people in the area.
I think it's well, my father was a keen horseman, and in those days, of course, it's not done today, but there was hunting, of course, in those days.
Oh yes.
My father used to ride the hounds quite a lot when he was a younger man. And we'll keep off of any controversy on that one. But
well, you can't judge the past by present standards. You know, that's what happened.
That's what happened. If you were on the farm and you were a landowner, as we were, you were expected to be part of the horse.
Exactly. It's as simple as that. You can't judge that.
No, because basically, if you'd had a tenant farm, we weren't tenants, we owned the farm. But if you had a tenant farm, if the landlord wanted to, if he was a hunt supporter, he'd go across your land whether he wanted to or not.
Yeah.
Father used to ride the hounds in the 40s, probably during the war in the 40s, and he always said one of the things he said, with the people in the hunting field, you either get the best manners or you get the worst.
Yes.
2 extremes. I mean, you had some which were terrible, and some which were who were very pleasant, very ladylike and gentlemanly people who you really like to have conversation with.
Well, I think it differentiates the gentry from the wannabes, as they'd say today.
Oh, nouveau riche, yes,
yes,
I know, yes,
exactly.
yeah. And that used to sum up farming a bit in those days, because one of the things you had, we were small farmers. Well, we had about 130 acres, so it wasn't that small at the time.
And that's why he's a squire, viewers. Anything over 100 acres equals squire, not farmer. Just thought I'd point that out to you.
Thing is that in those days, if you were a family farm, you had fairly limited resources. I mean, farming had been good during the Second World War. I mean, I wasn't born then, so I didn't come through the Second World War. But farming had been good during the Second World War. And then after the war, you had this thing of people that had made their money in the city, in the stock market, on the stock market and other institutions, banks and whatnot, would buy farms as a tax loss. And then they were the ones who could afford to, well, we used to call them the jumpers, because they could jump from one thing into another. Let's say, for example, they used to often had a farm manager, and if the farm manager said, well, pigs are going to be successful this year, they would sell what they had and put their money into pigs. Then, say in a year or 2, the pigs didn't pay, and arable paid, they would get rid of their pigs and then buy machinery and go arable. And so they could do that, but the ordinary farmer couldn't do that that. And that's one of the reasons is why they had such production surges, why you used to hear of butter mountains and wheat mountains and all this, was the fact it was this jumping about from one thing to another. And it really made it difficult for anybody else. The
subsidies and all the rest of it. And that was the time, of course, a lot of the smaller farms, 130 acres probably wouldn't support a family today. And these characters were buying up small farms and making 5, 6, 8,000 acre farms.
Exactly.
And then they started grubbing the hedges up and all sorts of things like that.
Which caused a lot more problems. I know exactly what you mean. We had people near us that used to do exactly the same thing. We had one man who married the daughter of a local builder, and they had this farming company, and the things they used to get up to was unbelievable. Because they used to, in fact, they gave us a demonstration. I remember he asked us to go to his farm one day, and he was going to give us a demonstration of them crop spraying by aircraft.
Oh, right.
And he had this light aircraft doing crop spray. Blimey, talk about hit and miss. It would worry me to death doing that. God, it was all over the place.
Yes.
Talk about hit the field, hit everything round it. Phew, Lord.
Well, you know, nobody consults the wind, do they?
No. Oh, and he was one of these that had all these bright ideas. You know, they tried ploughing land that was completely too heavy. And I remember them trying to plough a field with 2 tractors. They had a plough and then a tractor attached to the plough, and they had another tractor in front. And the job of the tractor in front was to hold down the front of the one at the back was rearing up all the time. How the heck they got away with that without somebody getting killed, I don't know, because we saw that spectacle. Oh, good Lord, what's he doing now? And all sorts of bright things used to happen.
Dear, oh dear, oh dear. But I bet you've met a few characters in other aspects of your life. What about dealing? Have you met very many characters when you were buying and selling gramophones?
Oh golly, yes. Oh yes. Lovejoy comes to mind. I mean, that's a fictional character, but that series was quite accurate.
There's a lot of truth in
Lovejoy.
Lovejoy.
There's a lot of truth in there, Lovejoy. You've got 2 main characters. You've got Lovejoy himself, who was a sort of lovable rogue. Well, there were plenty of those around, I promise you.
And ones that weren't so lovable too.
Oh gosh, oh my word, yes indeed. Oh yes. You soon got to know the ones you could deal with and the ones you couldn't.
Well, you got to know a very strange collector who lived fairly locally to you, who was a bit pernickety, we'll say.
Oh my word, yes. He, Jeff, yes, he was a character. He kept me going for a long time. He was almost a fanatical collector. He wanted everything, but the thing was, he wanted everything in absolutely pristine condition. Which isn't easy if you're dealing with old stuff. But it got so stupid as he would look at the screws holding the motor board on the gramophone and saying, "Was that an original screw, or has that been replaced? And is that the right finish screw? And there's this, oh gosh, you know, talk about having a screw loose." Mind you, I had to deal with it because he was one of the best customer I had, and I sold a lot of things to him.
Well, this is it, isn't it? You know, and at one point he was sort of sending out orders. You know, he got a reputation as being a millionaire collector.
Oh my word, yes, I heard all about that, and that was a marvellous story. He sent to somebody. He wanted
a fair distance away.
He wanted an Edison Ambrola.
Yes.
Well, anyway, I said, well, I'd like an Ambrola as well. Well, this gentleman had 2 Ambrolas. One was a floor standing one, I think it was a 75, and the other one was an Ambrola 50. Well, I had a call from Jeff and said that this chap was coming up with these 2 machines. Which one did I want? I said, well, what I prefer, I'd like the table model.
Yes.
And anyway,
well, it's the same mechanism, isn't it?
Same mechanism. I thought, well, I don't want a floor standing machine just to store cylinders. I'll have a table model. And anyway, the man came up and brought the instrument up, and the funny thing was, the one that I bought worked perfectly, but the one that Jeff bought, he didn't get on with, and complained, and the chap had to come back and do all sorts of things. And
didn't the chap actually say to him, they had problems with it when it arrived, and he said, well, let's swap the motors. Well, to a man as pernickety as that, that was a no-go. There was a big black mark underneath that gentleman's supplier's name.
Yeah, but mind you, I had mine. I sent the chap the money for it, and it was fine. It's a lovely machine, but no, it's very, very tricky sometimes.
Well, it is dealing with some of these people. And there was a sort of country chap you dealt with. There used to be 3 of them who used to visit you occasionally.
Oh yes, that's right. They used to come from Gloucester way, and they were, oh dear, yes indeed. There was one chap that was a real, came across like a Wurzel. You know, if you see the Wurzel, like that Wurzel.
Didn't have a straw in his mouth, but
not quite. No. But he was another character. Yeah, he was a good actor though, because everybody thought he was absolutely really broad, you know, broad country and a bit thick, and he thought, but actually he was as sharp as a packet of pins. But he did get some interesting stuff, I've got to admit. He had some very rare gramophones. He had some very rare stuff. I used to have to go, because he was one of the sources the supplier could get things from.
Well, yes.
Because he used to go around all these auctions and all these fairs round Gloucester way, and used to buy stuff, and then I used to get a call, I've got some things for you. I used to go down and do it. Now he lived with his mother, and they lived in this old people's bungalow, and they both smoked like chimneys.
Oh dear.
And when you went in there, you could cut the atmosphere with a knife. I mean, I used to in a way dread going there, because not that they weren't pleasant, but it got to the stage that I was ill for 2 days afterwards. Literally, they didn't have a window open, they were smoking each other all day. You had to almost go like this to blow the smoke away to see anything. It was terrible, it really was. Unfortunately, tragically, they both departed this world now, so they're not here anymore now.
Well, I think the smoking may have had something to do with it.
I think it definitely. I think there's no doubt about that.
Everything came pre-patinated.
Oh God, yes, it used to have to leave everything in the shed for weeks for the smell of smoke,
fumigating,
and then have to actually wash everything off to try and get the nicotine off of it.
Good Lord.
And that was grand. But mind you, I did have some rare stuff from him. There's no doubt about it.
Some people have a knack of finding wonderful things, or did in the past.
He had a collection of very rare stuff. His own collection was quite rare. He had nearly all of the Apollo portables. And then he had unusual things like bellophones and diaphones and gramophones like that, which are really you don't see very often.
No.
But I used to do a trade occasionally. He'd see something that I'd got, and we used to do a swap with it. It was always a tough job dealing with him.
Well, the thing is, people took him for a fool and a country bumpkin, but there was no flies on him. And he also knew his onions. He knew his stuff.
Oh, he knew his gramophones, all right. Absolutely, yes.
There was no getting away from it. He knew his stuff, and he found it, and he knew what he was looking at.
Very much so. Oh, very much so. Yes, indeed.
Yes. There used to be a lot of characters about in the gramophone business. Some of them are still around, sadly.
Well, that's no bad thing. It would be pretty boring if they weren't. That's the trouble with lacking these days. There are not enough characters around.
Well, there aren't enough buyers, that's a fact. And eBay has distorted the market. Can you tell us of some of the things you've bought on eBay and the experiences you've had? Well,
eBay, it's like the internet or the computer generally. It's a good servant but a bad master. You can get very good things. I mean, do you remember that one I bought this year, that dulciphone?
Yes, a wonderful machine.
A wonderful dulciphone, inlaid mahogany, which I bought from the granddaughter of the original owner.
Extraordinary. In the village where it had been bought brand new about 1913-14.
Yes, that's right. So that was a nice one. I got that reasonably. And yet 1 or 2 hours after, well, this just went through the roof and couldn't get anywhere near them.
Things like Dan sets and that seem to make stupid money.
I think the one that surprises me are these Hacker gondoliers. They make these they're only late 60s, early 70s record players. They fetch fantastic money, and they're not rare. See, a lot of this stuff isn't rare. See, Dan set record players, they're not rare. I mean, I suppose it's all a question of condition. If you want a Dan set, you could have got a reasonable one that would at least play records. But some of them they're fetching for hundreds of pounds these days. It's unbelievable to me.
It's just
when I remember buying the wretched things new back in the 60s.
I remember buying the things in the early boot fairs in the mid to late 80s for £4 or £5 a go.
Exactly.
And because I couldn't get replacement cartridges, I used to chuck them and buy another one. What a terrible thing to do. I should have heaped them up and become immensely wealthy, like what I am not now. It's extraordinary, really.
Well, I think what brought that home to me was I went to, must be 10, 15 years ago, went up to London on a day trip, and we went to Alphy's, the antique centre. You remember Alphy's? I don't know if it's still going or not.
I'm not sure, I don't think so.
It used to be Alphy's in those days, and there was a man there. That was in the days when you could have got a Dan set record player locally for about £5, and there was a chap up there selling them for 60, 70 and £80 even in those days. And you go up to somewhere like Portobello Road, you get people even today selling them for a heck of a lot of money. Well,
that's the sort of London premium.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
And the sort of metropolitan premium for these things, and it's odd, really. You know, I used to go up, an uncle of mine used to live near the Portobello Road. I was about 11. I bought 2 crate loads of records on about the 3rd store we passed, and then had to walk around the whole place with them. I didn't do it again, viewers.
No, I know what you mean. It's not easy, is it?
No, I still have arms like a gorilla now, amongst other things. But no, it's a strange world, really. And when you worked for OUP, were there some characters there?
Oh, mate, oh yes, of course, oh yes, there were all sorts of people. There was one chap I remember. He lived on his own in a because they had a house belonging to the press in North Oxford where some of the single people used to rent a room. If they were living on their own, this chap used to rent a room up there. And I remember once hearing that he'd had his the only heating he had in his room was a big electric light bulb.
Oh.
He wouldn't run anything else. He had a gas heater, and he had one of these propane gas cylinder heaters.
Yes.
And I remember he had the company sort of contact him. He hadn't had any new gas cylinders, and I think it was about 2 years later, and he had never changed a gas cylinder.
Oh dear.
And the other trick of his was he used to ride a bicycle, and another trick of his was we used to start at 7:30. Well, being as I've got a distance to travel, I left plenty of time, and I used to get there around about 7 o'clock, so I'd got a bit of time to sit down before I started work. And he was normally there before me in the summer. But when the night started to draw in, you noticed he would get slightly later every morning, a bit later every morning, and then when it got dark, he'd put his bicycle lights on. It was all to avoid the bicycle lights. And the other thing he did, which was a real classic, was he was quite a mean chap in a way, pleasant enough, quite. And he always had the same. We had at one stage we had a restaurant installed down at the social centre of the press, called the Clown and Press Institute, and he used to go there and have his meals. And for years, all he had every single day was sausage and mash, because it was the cheapest thing on the menu. And for years, and if they ran out of sausages, there was hell to pay when our friend couldn't get his sausage and mash. He used to go and storm at the desk. Well, I want my sausages. Well, we can't have them. Oh dear, oh dear. All this fuss about this sausage and mash, and that was years, not just days. Every day for years that went on.
Dear, oh dear. And you used to instruct people on forklift trucks.
Oh yes.
Was anything amusing happen? A couple of brief anecdotes?
Oh, that
rather
was
amusing.
Yes, that was one of the jobs. Well, you see, I started the press in 1971, and in 1974 the Health and Safety at Work Act came out, and to give the press its due, they saw it coming and they acted on it quickly. Within a very short time of the act becoming law, we had procedures in place long before anybody else, and one of the things, we had quite a lot of forklift trucks. We had them for various reasons, obviously loading and unloading lorries, and blokes had pallet trucks taking the work to the various departments, and these people had to have some kind of a training to prove that they could actually use the things. I mean, normally they used to put in the early days, you'd put somebody on a truck, so you do this to go left, you do that to go right. The person would get lost and hit something, and that would be it, and then be in a bag. So yes, and so that had to be dealt with. And I went on training courses with a company called Barlow Myers down in Maidenhead to do an instructor's course. I think I took my instructor's course about 1973-74, just about the time of the Act, and that got me able to train people to drive and then give them driving tests, so that they at least understood the basics of truck handling and what to do to be safe. The other thing, the next thing was that the instructors had to be RTITB, that's Road Transport Industry Training Board, had to be RTITB registered. And to do that, we had to do a 5-day bridging course, because the first course was 5 days, and then it was had to go again to do a bridging course to bring it up to RTITB standards. I mean, they had a training manual which was used. A lot of our forklift trucks, one of our forklift trucks at the press was an American Hyster, and that was a gas LPG truck, quite a heavy forklift. And so, I mean, Barlow Handling were Hyster dealers anyway, so I went down there several times to do forklift truck, the instruction. I learned to had to do my certificates I had to retake my tests every 5 years as an instructor, and then I came back and then tried to instill some safety into some of the ones.
Did it work?
I think about 90% of the time, yes, it did. But there were one or two tricky cases.
Oh
that,
dear.
there are always one or two that think they know it all.
Yeah, unfortunately they're the worst, I've found.
The training courses were really funny because they were usually about 10 of us on a course. Now, do you remember that series called The Office?
Ah, yes.
Well, there's one in there where there's one of the episodes. It's a fly on the wall documentary. If people haven't seen it, Ricky Gervais, and there's one in there where they do a training course.
Ah, yes, notorious.
When they're sitting around in a circle listening to this chap burbling on all this nonsense, and they're bored out of their brains. I've seen so many like that. And the instructor was just the classic type you used to get.
Well,
as an instructor used to come and do the training, and that was so accurate, it was amazing.
But did any amusing incidents happen with that you heard of with forklift trucks?
I think one of the most amazing things was we had a man who was in charge of the engineers. Now at the press we had a complete maintenance department. We had men who were builders, painters and decorators, plumbers, electricians, carpenters, and they were all grand lads. If you wanted something done, you used to go and say, you can have a bit of blood that side.
Yeah.
He used to manage it. He used to. And anyway, they're all grand chaps, and the chap in charge was, I think the man in charge, the manager, would have passed as a deputy to Peter Sellers as Inspector Clouseau.
Oh dear. And
he was one of those who got no sense of humour at all, and strange things happened. He was supposed to be the safety officer, and he was the most accident-prone person in the place.
Oh dear.
I remember one classic of his was they installed a machine on the ground on the first floor, and then down in the basement they had a room built to take. It was one that did cutting, so there was a lot of dust and paper bits flying about, and so they had this room with filters in which had bins that would fill up with the stuff, you see. Well, the wretched pipe blocked up, didn't it? And of course Clotty comes along, opens the door and gives it a whack at a great clout with a stick, and it goes woof, and covers him with white dust from head to foot. We were sort of scrabbling about trying to get out of the way of all this cloud of dust coming out of this thing. And another marvellous thing was one of my jobs up there was to look after a warehouse of printed sheets and finished books belonging to outside customers. Let's say you wrote your memoirs of the Indian Army, for example. Then
in all 17 volumes.
And you couldn't store them here.
No.
And you only wanted so many bound at a time. You'd say you have 2,000 printed. And you wanted 500 bound. We could do that. We could keep the books and we could keep the sheets to when you wanted some more. You see.
Yes. Yeah.
And anyway, it was quite a big place. I had quite a lot to do then because I was doing forklift truck training and looking after this store. And we could never get the place warm. It was always cold up there. Well, I didn't mind too much. I mean, I don't like a lot of heat anyway, but it really was cold, and anybody came to work up there, they always moaned and complained about it. And after one of the other supervisors said, "We've got to get you some warmth up here. You can't work like this." I said, "We've got a coat on, you know." And anyway, they had these massive pipes going around this place, and they traced it, and there was a join in the pipe, you see.
Right.
Well, he gets up there and starts undoing this pipe.
Oh dear.
Well, what he doesn't realise is there's live steam on that.
Oh.
On that, the joint broke, and all this water spewed all over the place. He was soaked from head to foot and had to run out of the way, because eventually all this steam started spewing out. You can imagine that. And what somebody had done was connected it up wrong, and they got live steam on both ends with water trapped in the middle.
Oh dear.
Oh yes, that was a chaos, that one. That really caused it. A lot of work got damaged. A hell of a problem with that.
Oh dear. Well, yes, indeed. And didn't you tell me the story of somebody who managed to drive a forklift truck into and through a wall?
Ah yes. Now this is a good one. This was one of the supervisors. very good player, very good chap. He was a good driver actually. But anyway, he had this pallet on this forklift, and this has got folded bundles of folded sheets on, and the stack started to fall off, you see.
Oh dear.
Well, he drove up against the wall to push it on, but unbeknown to him, his forks were sticking out about 18 inches the other side.
Right.
Whack, he hit the wall, and the chap on the loo the other side had rather a nasty surprise with 2 forks coming each side of his feet. And that is a dead true one.
Oh dear, oh dear.
Oh yes, yeah.
Wasn't there another story about two chaps working on a pipe and they managed to flood part of the place?
That was in another place. That was another episode. Yes, that was at another company I worked for later on after I left the press.
Yes.
And that was yes, they were. One was quite a skill. One was an engineer, had come from another branch of the company, and this young lad thought he knew it all. And I was doing another storeman's job there, but I used to do some lorry driving, so I was out on the lorry, and I came down the driveway with the lorry this day, and these chaps came out of the store looking like drowned rats. I said, "What the heck's happened here?" He said, "Well, do you know where we turn the water off?" I said, "No." I said, "I haven't got a clue." So it's flooding in there. Well, what they'd done, or what this lad had done, had sawn through this pipe, and it was a pressure water pipe, and there was this water spewing all over the place.
Oh dear.
And it was like the Sorcerer's Apprentice. It was all. And these chaps were trying to do it. They were just like drowned rats when they came out of there. I'd never seen anything like it. Of course, I couldn't help it. I started giggling and didn't improve things very much. And they said, "We do know where we turn the water off." I said, "No," and nobody else did. So I don't know what they did I think you had to get the water board to sort it out. Oh dear, that was
the water board to bail them out.
Exactly, yes, indeed.
Oh dear, and it's at this point, viewers, we bail out for this session. The Squire is going to do more videos in the future, but I'm sure you, and certainly I, would like to thank him for this wonderful set of anecdotes about characters. More videos to come. Thank you, Squire.
Thank you.
Thank you, viewers.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Goodbye.